Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskadyade Siddharane. Today I'm going to give a class which recently I gave something similar, but I don't know if everyone attended because it was in Spanish, but I'm going to give something similar today. Besides that, it's worthwhile going over because it's an important concept. Let me just... I'm going to read from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi-lila 1, text number 45. Guru Krishna Rupahana Shastrera Pramane Guru Rupe Krishna Kripa Karena Bhaktagane. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. According to the deliberate opinion of all revealed scriptures, the spiritual master is non-different from Krishna. Lord Krishna, in the form of the spiritual master, delivers his devotees. Purport. The relationship of a disciple with his spiritual master is as good as his relationship with his Supreme Lord. A Supreme Master always represents himself as the humblest servitor of the personality of Godhead, but the disciple must look upon him as the manifested representation of Godhead. Now, in one sense, whatever we see happening in this world is a manifestation of Krishna's energies. Krishna has two principal energies working in this world, or we are working under two principal energies. One is called Maya, or the illusory energy, and the other is called the internal energy of Krishna, or devotional service. The qualification to act in devotional service, Krishna says, Sadatam kirtiyantomam itantas shadridavrataha namasyantastamam bhaktya nityutash upasate. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls worship me with devotion. In other words, anyone who's chanting Krishna's glories, who's serving Krishna with determination, and has the proper conception, considering that we're 1/10,000th the size of tip hair in size, that one is doing it with surrender and humility. Now, even Krishna and Krishna's exalted devotees, they're always humble, because love and humility go together. When Srimati Radharani sees any devotee, she's so much in love with him or her that she feels herself humbled. She sees all the good qualities that the devotee has, and therefore she feels humility. Now, she is the internal energy, all-pervasive internal energy, the only one who ultimately can make Krishna happy, yet she's the humblest of all the devotees. Even Krishna, he feels himself insignificant compared to his devotees. Because as soon as there is pride, then pride and love don't go together very well. Material pride especially. And therefore even Krishna is humble. He becomes the servant of his servant, as we can see in the case of Arjuna, that Krishna became his chariot driver. Now, in the Vedic culture, the position of a chariot driver is not very high. It's considered to be a very low-class service, comparatively. And yet Krishna took the humble position of becoming the servant of his devotee and driving his chariot. when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in South India, and he saw one Brahmin was reading Bhagavad Gita, not very nicely, but was crying. Yet everyone else who heard this Brahmin reading Bhagavad Gita, they were laughing at him because of his poor reading. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was quite surprised that here is a Brahmin and he's reading Bhagavad Gita not so nicely, but he's crying. So he asked the Brahmin, how is it that you're reading Bhagavad Gita and you're crying, but it doesn't seem you know how to read so well? So the Brahmin said, well, it's a fact, practically speaking, from the point of view of the Vedic culture, I'm illiterate. I can't read Sanskrit so well. But my spiritual master has requested that every day I read the entire Bhagavad Gita. So following his instructions, I open up the Bhagavad Gita every day and I try to read it. But as soon as I open the Bhagavad Gita, at once I remember Krishna. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet he's so humble that he's become the chariot driver of his devotee. And when I think of how kind Krishna is, although he's the Supreme Person, still he's taken this position as the servant of his devotee. And so I begin to cry. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced him and said, you're the real reader of the Bhagavad Gita. You've actually understood Bhagavad Gita. So similarly, the spiritual master, as we'll find out in the next verse, he never thinks himself to be a spiritual master. He thinks himself to be the servant of his spiritual master. And because the spiritual master has sent him so many devotees to train up in Krishna consciousness, therefore he acts as a spiritual master. But knowing well that he never deviates from thinking that he's simply the humble servant of his spiritual master. And on behalf of his spiritual master, he's training these devotees. And by the mercy of the super soul, and by the mercy of his spiritual master, then he's able to give instructions to his followers and disciples.
Maharaj, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I didn't understand. You said we're going to the next verse and then you start speaking and it's not the next verse. Where are we? I'm sorry, last like 1 minute, I completely lost. It was from you? You were just speaking?
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the next verse yet.
Okay, I'm sorry. You said next verse and I kind of, okay, spaced out. I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry.
No, the next verse is Acharyama, is the next verse, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So the spiritual master, he thinks himself to be simply the servant of his spiritual master. And when, by the mercy of the super soul and Krishna, the spiritual master instructs him from within the heart, and he repeats that instruction to his followers and disciples. When he sees his followers and his disciples serving the instructions of his spiritual master, he learns from them how to become a better servant of his spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master takes his disciples as a kind of spiritual master, teaching him how to better serve his spiritual master. Now, that platform of realization, at least understanding, has to be there before one acts as any kind of spiritual master. Otherwise, what's the idea of spiritual? As soon as I think myself to be the controller or the enjoyer of any part of the material energy, then at once I become under the influence of the illusory energy, not the spiritual energy. Without serving one's spiritual master, one cannot be under the influence of the internal energy. Or at least, one may not be officially initiated by the spiritual master, but one must serve the instructions of the acarya in disciple succession, either directly or indirectly. but the very words of the Acharya are the words of Krishna coming in simple succession. So basically, what I'm going to explain in this class is the difference between the Acharya, such as Srila Prabhupada, who is our founder Acharya, and one who gives initiation. What's the similarities and what are maybe the differences? Because unless we can understand the role of Srila Prabhupada as the Acharya within our society, we won't be able to properly serve our initiating guru either, or any other devotee. Just like if you want to water the tree, you have to water the root. And our disciple succession is the root. Now, let me just say before I go to the next verse, well, let me just read the next verse, and before I go over the purport, I'll explain something about it. So the next verse is text number 46, Adi-lila. Acharyamam vijaniyam navamanite karichit namartya buddhya suyeta sarvadeva mayo guru. One should know the Acharya is myself and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is a representative of all the demigods. So this is a verse, as Prabhupada says in the purport. This is a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam 11:17-27, spoken by Lord Krishna when he was questioned by Uddhava regarding the four social and spiritual orders of society. The Lord was specifically instructing how a brahmachari should behave under the care of a spiritual master. A spiritual master is not the enjoyer of facilities offered by his disciples. He is like a parent. Without the attentive service of his parents, a child cannot grow to manhood. Similarly, without the care of the spiritual master, one cannot rise to the plane of transcendental service. Let me go over again Srila Prabhupada's introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, where he explains that one lady asked him to recommend an edition of the Bhagavad Gita in English that he could read. And he said, unfortunately, I cannot recommend any particular edition because all the ones that I'm familiar with, they've deviated from the purpose of the speaker. Then Prabhupada writes that if one wants to take a medicine, one has to follow the directions of the physician or the directions on the label of the medicine. One cannot take the medicine whimsically, according to his own idea. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to convince us that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one who doesn't accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there's no sense of reading his commentaries, because it's defeating the very purpose of the speaker. And the speaker, whether, of course, he says in Bhagavad Gita he's God, but he's also, according to Vedic authorities at least, such as Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, and later on Sankaracharya, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and others, they've also confirmed that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Krishna, he spoke Bhagavad Gita first to the sun god. Well, many years ago, he told Arjuna, he spoke to the sun god. And the sun god spoke to Vivishwan. Oh, the sun god is Vivishwan. Vivishwan spoke to Manu. And Manu instructed the same knowledge to Ikshvaku. In this way, this knowledge is coming through disciple succession. So Arjuna had certain qualities to receive this knowledge. Sako sime sakat cheti rahasyam hietat uttamam. Saevayam maya tedya yogo prakta paratana. Bhakto sime sakat cheti rahasyam hietat uttamam. That Arjuna was Krishna's devotee and his friend. So that's the best mood in receiving Bhagavad Gita. Be a devotee and friend of Krishna. It's very difficult to appreciate Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead if we don't like Krishna. It's going to be very difficult to appreciate. And if we're not willing at least to follow his instructions, then it's also a waste of time. We can read so many books of fiction, but we have nothing to apply within our lives, and therefore there's nothing to experience, except for just reading it. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada writes, should be accepted, at least theoretically, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That Prabhupada says is the submissive spirit of understanding Bhagavad Gita. Now, we may not realize Krishna is God yet, completely, but at least with some experience, with some faith that whatever we've developed, we should at least theoretically accept Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We don't have to reject Krishna as being God, nor do we have to blindly follow the fact that he's God. But if we want to derive any benefit from Bhagavad Gita, then we have at least apply it within our lives. Hear it, try to understand it, try to apply it, and then we can experience whether or not Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, if we reject Krishna as God, we're wasting our time. And if we blindly follow Krishna as God and don't try to understand, then we're also wasting our time. Therefore, similarly, because the knowledge comes into succession, there has to be some faith in those who are repeating the knowledge. Otherwise, then why listen to anyone giving a class and try to explain it, including Srila Prabhupada? Now, Srila Prabhupada has written our purports for these books that we're reading, and therefore, at least theoretically, we should accept that he's the acarya. We don't have to blindly accept, of course. We've heard from devotees, and we ourselves are having this class right now, because somehow or another we heard from either Srila Prabhupada directly, or we've heard from his representatives, and we've applied it to some degree within our lives, and we thought it was worthwhile to come back and hear a class again about how to become a better devotee of Krishna. So to some extent, we've accepted Prabhupada as the acarya. We've heard that he's went around the world so many times, and he established the movement practically from nothing. He turned hippies into happy Krishna devotees. So that required a certain amount of expertise and transcendental awareness. When Srila Prabhupada was once asked that, can you show us a mystic power? And Srila Prabhupada pointed out to his devotees, his disciples in the audience, and said, this is my mystic power. Just some years ago, these same devotees were drug-addicted hippies, and now they're happy Krishna-conscious devotees. As Prabhupada writes in the Krishna book, they're dancing and chanting like jubilant peacocks. So he said, that's my mystic power. They're following the regular principles of freedom, while before they were addicted to so many bad habits. So with that submissive spirit, one can hear the philosophy coming from Prabhupada. Now let me point out, there are some devotees who have decided, especially it seems those who have some contact with universities, who want to be so-called objective. And sometimes they think, or they pose that sometimes Prabhupada was absolute in his his instructions and his example, and sometime what might be considered his conditioned nature came out, his social conditioning. So this is actually more or less an idea that sometimes the Acharya is on the spiritual platform when he's quoting Shastra, and sometimes he falls into Maya, into the material platform, when he talks about worldly things. So this is quite a misconception. Prabhupada addressed this in different ways at different times. For instance, in one morning walk with Satsvarup Maharaj and Jayadvaita Swami, the question came up about the Acharya sometimes forgetting verses or falling asleep in an inappropriate time, etc. So how these two sannyasis asked Srila Prabhupada, how is the devotee supposed to understand this? And Prabhupada said that the perfection of the Acharya is Bhakti Shashana, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The perfection of the devotee is how he's preaching Krishna consciousness. From the mundane point of view, he may have said something which is, especially in the case of an Acharya like Srila Prabhupada and also Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, that from socially acceptable or politically correct, Prabhupada would not be considered very popular among certain persons in this world. Prabhupada did not preach in order to be politically correct or socially acceptable. He preached to a certain audience and made certain statements, not so much because he was giving a definitive idea on a certain subject, whether it be, for instance, controversial subjects nowadays, the position of women, the position of blacks or Jews, or whether we went to the moon, or any other issue like that. Prabhupada, when he was preaching to certain audiences, for instance, did not want to get in a whole argument over these mundane topics. Although sometimes he made statements about going to the moon, he didn't make a big deal out of it. Why? Because his main idea of preaching was to convince people to take up the process of Krishna consciousness. And if he had to argue with people over mundane things, which, according to Maharaj Rishabdev, actually Prahlad Maharaj is Nitevidu Swartikatim Hi Vishnu, Darashya Ye Bahir Arthamanina. That these things are not very significant. Arthamanina, they're actually insignificant. So Prabhupada would sometimes talk about these things, but he generally didn't make a big thing out of them and disagree with his audience who may have believed firmly in a certain subject matter. Instead, Prabhupada tried to get them to engage in devotional service and understand Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example I give sometimes is when I first went to open a temple or help open a temple in Houston, Texas, in America. And there the temple devotees would go regularly out on book distribution. That was our main service. And there was one area of Texas called Vidor, Texas. At that time, it was the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan. Ku Klux Klan was the organization which did not appreciate minorities, especially blacks or anyone else. And they were famous for hanging blacks and others from trees if they thought they got out of hand. Now we'd go there and distribute books there. generally we didn't go in dhotis and have tilak and shaven heads. Of course, we had shaven heads, but for them, it wasn't a big thing having a shaven head. And we distribute many books there. Actually, it was one of the most receptive places for distributing Bhagavad Gita. We never got into an argument on social issues because they were quite simple people. And they were generous also. So they bought many, many Bhagavad Gitas. I don't know how many of them read the book. Or anyhow, they did buy them at least. Now, if we would have gotten into an argument on social issues to that particular audience, not only probably we wouldn't have sold any books, but probably I wouldn't be here to give this lecture. So the question was whether we're going to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books or get into arguments with people. So Srila Prabhupada is expert in how to present Krishna consciousness to different audiences, and therefore he said different things at different times about what would be considered controversial subjects, because he had to deal with different personalities and not agitate their minds. It's one of the principles that Krishna talks about in Bhagavad Gita, anuvega karam vakyam. If you're going to talk to someone and they're not your disciple, you try not to agitate their minds. Now, someone may take particular instances of what Prabhupada said on a particular subject and find it that to them themselves, they find it socially unacceptable or politically incorrect. And therefore they criticize the acarya mainly because of their own particular biases, as if they understand reality perfectly and they have an absolute understanding of mundane subject matters. And therefore they miss the point, that the point is not to convince people on certain subject matters. That's considered to be blind folly and absurd inquiries to condemn, Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita. A waste of time. We may be politically correct. We may be completely socially acceptable. But at the end of life, if we don't remember Krishna, then we come back in another body again. Tarka apratishta shutiya vibhina. That in this material world, dry arguments and absurd inquiries are condemned, Prabhupada writes. Once you not only hear submissively, but once you get a clear understanding through submission, service, and inquiry. For takar pratishta shutiya vibhina, from the Mahabharata it is said, we can go on arguing about different subjects. We may read different literatures or talk about different rishis in the past, but ultimately it's the acarya who will give us an idea of how to surrender to Krishna. If we don't accept the acarya, then what we're doing is accepting so many other mundane persons as our leader and their opinions. But that will not lead us to the absolute truth. So at least theoretically, we accept Srila Prabhupada as our acarya. And the acarya is a personality whose only business is Krishna consciousness. Basically speaking, he has a full mood of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore he's called acarya. And as it says, Robert writes in the purport, that this is the end of the purport, Lavatalanga Tati Devidasi, the very last paragraph, where it starts, Srila Jiva Goswami in his Bhakti Samdarbha has clearly explained that a pure devotee's observation of the spiritual master and Lord Shiva as being one with the personality of Godhead exist in terms of their being very dear to the Lord, not identical with him in all respects. Following the footsteps of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami, later acharyas like Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have confirmed the same truths. In his prayers to the spiritual master, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms that all the revealed scriptures accept the spiritual master to be identical with the personality of Godhead, because he is a very dear and confidential servant to the Lord. Gaudiya Vaishnavas therefore worship Srila Gurudev, the spiritual master, in light of his being the servitor of the personality of Godhead. In all the ancient literatures of a devotional service and the more recent songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and other unalloyed Vaishnavas, the spiritual master is always considered either one of the confidential associates of Srimati Radharani or a manifested representative of the Srila Nityananda Prabhu. So this is specifically talking about the initiating guru, and specifically about the acharya. Now, one takes initiation with the idea out of all the devotees, and every devotee is to one degree or another acting as a representative of Krishna. But the initiating spiritual master is supposed to be Guru Ashraya. According to Rupa Goswami, the beginning is Adao Guru Ashraya, the steady manifestation of devotional service. That doesn't mean that the guru is necessarily on the level of a confidential associate of Srimati Radharani or a manifested representative of Srila Nityananda Prabhu. But he's supposed to be a representative of Krishna. In other words, Krishna accepts service from the devotees. The spiritual master accepts the service of the devotees and offers it to Krishna on behalf of Krishna. Therefore, the spiritual master helps train the disciples in the attitude of service or surrender. We have to surrender to someone if we want to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. Krishna says, Sarva Dharma Prityaja Mame Kam Sharanam Vraja. At the end of Bhagavad Gita, he offers Arjuna the opportunity to either accept what he said or not. And if he didn't accept what he said, that Krishna was willing to repeat the same instructions again to clarify Arjuna's understanding what Krishna had said. But ultimately, Krishna says that you should follow my instructions. You should surrender to me. There are different stages of surrender, but some surrender should be there. Accepting things that are favorable, rejecting things that are unfavorable, having faith that Krishna will maintain and protect us, having no interest outside of Krishna's interest, and always feeling meek and humble. These are different progressive stages of surrender. But some surrender has to be there if we want to make progress, and we have to surrender to a person. Now, ultimately in our society, as we go into the next verse, Shiksha Guru Ke Tajani Krishnera Srup Antaryami Bhakti Shvesta Eduri Rup. Once you know this instructing spiritual master to be the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna manifests himself as the super soul and as the greatest devotee of the Lord. Antaryami Bhakti Shvesta. So two manifestations of Krishna help us progress in spiritual life. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami states that the instructing spiritual master is a bona fide representative of Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna himself teaches us as the instructing spiritual master from within and without. From within, he teaches as Paramatma, our constant companion, and from without, he teaches from the Bhagavad Gita as the instructing spiritual master. There are two kinds of instructing spiritual masters. One is the liberated person fully absorbed in meditation and devotional service, and the other is he who invokes the disciples' spiritual consciousness by means of relevant instructions. Thus, the instructions in the science of devotion are differentiated in terms of the objective and subjective ways of understanding. The acarya, in the true sense of the term, was authorized to deliver Krishna, enriches the disciple with full spiritual knowledge, and thus awakens him to the activities of devotional service. In other words, there are different types of spiritual masters, either diksha or shiksha. One of them is the liberated soul who's absorbed and fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and therefore his knowledge is not just theoretical or even on the basis of his own experience. He sees everything as it describes it in our scriptures, because he's living on the spiritual platform. He's experiencing the spiritual platform 24 hours a day, literally. Others, they can help us progress. As it says, Krishneti yasya giritam manasedriyeta. Rupa Goswami tells us we serve different types of devotees on different levels. We respect devotees who are neophytes, who don't follow very carefully, but we respect them within our mind. We cooperate with those who have taken initiation and are trying to become the servant of Krishna. But all of us, we serve under higher authority, the instructions of higher authority, how to treat equals and how to treat those who are baleshu, those who are giving instruction to help them progress, and even those who are superior to us. We learn from the most superior devotees how to serve the superiors also. But the acarya is one who teaches us and everyone how to properly reciprocate the loving exchanges with the devotees and serve Krishna and help the innocent and avoid the atheists. He instructs us how to make advancement in devotional service. So we make our spiritual master, in order to those who give us initiation or those who give us instructions, we have to accept them as representatives of Krishna. And therefore, especially before we take initiation, we have to have faith that this devotee is as good as Krishna, at least his instructions and his example. He's not Krishna. From the material point of view, he may make mistakes, but we understand these mistakes, as I pointed out, are not very significant compared to his preaching of Krishna consciousness. On the other hand, as members of the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, that we accept Srila Prabhupada as our acarya, and therefore we learn to judge everyone according to Prabhupada's instructions and example. Now, that doesn't mean that everything that our initiating guru does, we try to analyze if it's in line with Srila Prabhupada. But we should know, at least Prabhupada's teachings, how everyone, including, we should appreciate how the spiritual master is serving the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu under the guidance of Srila Prabhupada. It's not that we study Prabhupada's books to find criticism, but we should try to study the books to find some appreciation of how our guru and others are serving Krishna. Unless we take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books and his vision and accept that he had the highest vision and the highest experience of Krishna consciousness, we can appreciate how others are also serving Krishna. We won't have any basis of understanding who's doing what. Therefore, we have to study these books in order to learn appreciation, not only for Srila Prabhupada and his activities, because Krishna's Srimad Bhagavatam, Vyasadeva Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, will show us Srila Prabhupada's exalted position, what he did and why it's exalted. At the same time, by studying Prabhupada's and studying these books, including Prabhupada's purpose, we'll be able to appreciate every devotee appropriately. Not artificially, but not sentimentally, but by actual transcendental spiritual vision, by which we can have real deep appreciation for the activities of every devotee, including those who are giving initiation and those who are giving us instructions. But ultimately, everything has to be based upon Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And if we hear from others who are criticizing Prabhupada, however innocently, unconsciously, or whatever they're doing it, scholastically, whatever they're doing, that this is going to be very detrimental to our bhakti kripa. If we cut off the root, the acarya, from our Krishna consciousness, we more or less, the plant will die. We're considered asara. So we should avoid such association, and we should understand things properly. There was never a time when Prabhupada said that he ever forgot Krishna, nor was he ever outside of Krishna's influence or his spiritual master's influence. Everything he was doing was a perfect instrument for Krishna. It's not our business to try to figure out what he was doing wrong. It's our business to find out, to understand how everything he was doing and everything he was saying was in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, it is said in the Shraita Sutara Upanishad, Yasya deve para bhaktira yata deve tata guru tasyaite kahita prakashante mahatmanaha. One who has firm faith in both the spiritual master and Krishna, he can actually make spiritual advancement. Now, firm faith in the spiritual master means ultimately firm faith in Srila Prabhupada. We may find spiritual master may sometimes do things we may have doubts with, but then we have to see it from the point of view that still I remain, even if the spiritual master sometimes has some faults, according to my vision, then still I don't reject the spiritual master. Just like a girl, she wants to get married. So she acts as a nice daughter to her parents. She prays to Lord Shiva. She hopes that they make a nice arrangement for her marriage. But if somehow or another she gets a husband, at least in the Vedic culture, which is not up to standard, she doesn't reject him. She remains as a faithful servant, like Srila Prabhupada's sister Pishima remained as a faithful servant to her husband, and she converted him into a devotee by her tolerance and faithfulness. So we remain faithful to the initiating guru, only reject the initiating guru if he doesn't bring us to Krishna. If he's bringing us away from Krishna, then we can't follow him. Guru nasasyat, swajano nasasyat. One should not become a guru unless one can deliver Krishna to his disciples. So it is said by Narakari Sakara, if the spiritual master becomes antagonistic towards, envious of
Maharaj,
Krishna.
I'm so sorry. Could you please slow down a little bit? Sorry.
If the spiritual master becomes envious of Krishna or his devotees, or he becomes helplessly entangled in sense gratification, then one may have to wait and see, and maybe eventually one may not be able to follow the spiritual master. But this is quite extreme. We have to give up this envious attitude towards not only ordinary living entities, but even those who are higher than us. At the same time, we shouldn't be blind followers. We have to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books and see things properly. So we know how to act on every level within our society, every level, how to treat every devotee on every level appropriately. So I'll stop there. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, like we know your role in ISKCON as Sannyas Minister. So do you have this interest in the distinction between initiating spiritual master and the acarya, you know, sometime before that, or how did that
as the sannyas minister, do I have an interest in the difference between the acharya and the initiating spiritual master?
No, I mean, when did that interest develop? Like,
I'm
for you as a devotee?
Guru Services Committee. You know, there's a committee on the GBC called the Guru Services Committee. So we're supposed to make sure that those who are initiating gurus were in charge of developing education, seeing that they're following properly, seeing that the philosophy is properly applied within ISKCON. But I think everyone should know Prabhupada and what his position is. From my experience, is that there's good deal of confusion about Prabhupada's position within our society. Sometimes some are fanatic, like the Ridviks, there's only Prabhupada and no one else. And some are the other extreme, that there's everyone else except for Prabhupada. That Prabhupada's not so important, his Vyas Puja is not so important. His teaching, you don't have to read his books. You read the new books that are coming out. There's so many of them. As if any new book that comes out can stand independently of Prabhupada's books. As if there's something new that has to be discovered. Now, new books may come out and they help explain what Prabhupada says in his books. But if they actually subtly even criticize Prabhupada or try to invent something new or think they have some superior knowledge, then they fall into the category of what Sridhar Swami, Ballavacharya, he was in Jagannath Puri, and he one day came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates and told them that he's written a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam that surpasses Sridhar Swami. Sridhar Swami didn't understand things properly because he preached according to time and audience. So Sri Damodar Maharaj told Vallabhacharya, why don't you go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and tell him that? So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that Vallabhacharya had written a commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam, where he claimed that he had surpassed his Sridhar Swami, the original commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's answer was, in my opinion, anyone who doesn't respect the Swami, because in India, Swami means the husband, also, that anyone who doesn't respect the Swami, I consider to be a prostitute. So that was quite an insult to Vallabhacharya, indirectly an insult. So our spiritual advancement depends upon our faith, not blind faith, but faith is developed by experience, but experience won't be there until we are willing on faith to come to a next level of devotional service by accepting the words of the Acharya, try to understand them, try to understand how to put them into practice and apply them within our lives. Otherwise, without the mercy coming from the acarya as a representative of all the acaryas in discipline succession, and ultimately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Panchatattva, and Krishna and his associates in Vrindavan, then there's no possibility of making any spiritual advancement. Isn't that one of the prayers that we're supposed to sing in the morning? By the mercy of the spiritual master, one gets Krishna's mercy. And without the mercy of the spiritual master, then there's no advancement. So we have a spiritual master, and he doesn't have faith, or he's not, to some degree or another, in Prabhupada, he's not connected. Then how is he connected to acharyas in super succession? What is he connected to? Adi-lila.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Just wondering, we got newcomers in the temple. What is the process? How do we preach them, especially for the Srila Prabhupada's books? Because so many are keen to read. So how do we preach them in the temple?
You got a new what?
Newcomers, new congregation people.
Well, give them some prasadam. Repeat what they can understand from Prabhupada's books. Preach appropriately, so according to their understanding, something they can apply. Give them some, when appropriate, give them some japa beads. Ask them to chant Hare Krishna and japa beads. Give them some prasadam. Give them some, let them come to the lectures and hear appropriate philosophy according to their level of understanding. And be nice to them. Krishna is nice to everyone. So as Krishna's
Right.
representative, we should also be nice to others.
Right. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. We'll see you very soon in the December.
Yes. Okay. Anything else? All right, so we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grant Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Chaitanya
Jai.
ki jai.
Jai.
Jai. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.